your journey toward mastering manifestation looks like this. Now, it's important to understand that, and you might already be experiencing this, where you hear all the things, do your affirmations, feel as if you already have it, think about the end in mind, right? Be it before you can have it. But let's really walk through what this looks like so that way you can gain a good understanding as to the type of mindset you must have, especially as it relates to the rest of the world, your community, the people you're around, this kind of other layered reality. All right. So you function in a place of basically balancing two worlds. Okay. Now, this world is the world of the past. Okay. And that world of the past is a byproduct of who you once were, right? Of the past self. Now, the past self most certainly is not your present self and is definitely not your true self, what I often refer to as your future self. Now, what you must understand is that when it comes to transitioning from a reality of what you are now to what you desire to experience, you're going to go through this phase of transitioning. And your past self is going to basically materialize or has materialized what is happening to your life right now. So, for example, if your finances are tough, that is a result of the choices you made in the past. If you're in a relationship where you're not feeling fulfilled, that is a result of you either deciding to get into that relationship in the past or having a particular mindset that didn't really serve you or align with the relationship you truly seek to have in the past, thus resulting in this current situation, like this current relationship. So, but you're not the only one, right? So the rest of the world functions like this, so to speak. Now, what I want you to really get into is that the manifestation of the past self turns out to be what we often call, right, the present, right? This moment, now, okay? So you can almost, and I like to do circles. Circles means a lot to me. So you can almost say this is, your past self. This is the present. And then, of course, we're going to get into this third circle a little bit later. But the first circle represents the past self. The second circle in the middle represents the present. But more so, it represents the present reality that the past self has created. Now, here's the trick. This third circle represents what we often call a future. Okay. Now, remember, when it comes to you as a divine being, a being of consciousness, time doesn't really exist. There is no linear time for that aspect of who you are, that true essence of who you are. Time really relates to our experience in this physical body on this physical plane. But it also relates to how we materialize things that we want. So though we are timeless, we still have to apply that into this timed, framework. Okay. So your job here is to understand that this present moment, right, is just simply a reflection of the past self, right? The past self. Now, what you want though is that future self. You want that desire, right? The desired self, the self of you, the version of you that has it all, right? The version of you that is aligned, the version of you that is rich, that is healthy, right? That is in love. Okay. That's the version of you you are meant to actually achieve and be. But sometimes we get caught up in our ego. I'm going to touch on the ego a little bit today as well. Now, remember that this future self is not just something that we think is far away. It's not just something that we fantasize about. It is real. Okay. Because time doesn't exist. So that version of you is happening right now, is real. But we have to acknowledge all aspects of the framework that we exist in, even though the framework that we are existing in on this physical plane is a temporary framework. It is a matrix. We still have to acknowledge it. We still have to acknowledge the game that we're playing here. If you are playing video games, in order for you to be good at the game, to reach the destination, the goal, you have to respect, honor, and go by the rules of that game. We're playing this game called life. So we have to essentially honor the game, even though we're outside of the game when it comes to the true essence of who you are. So in order for you to really get into manifesting or aligning with this future version of yourself, you have to essentially bring that version of you into the present moment. Now, here's the thing. Everybody else is functioning from this paradigm that you are, in fact, the only way we function is by bringing the past to the present moment, right? Because that is the linear understanding. That is the linear understanding, paradigm, belief system of time, okay? Time and space. That is based on the characteristics, the essence of the ego, okay? The ego is what we need that keeps us tethered to this world. It's like if you're playing a video game, the video game controller, okay, is keeping you tethered to the game console, to the actual game. So in order for you to play the game, you need to play with that controller. In order for you to play the game of life, you need the ego in order to do it. Now, the ego functions by a set of particular rules and laws. That is linear time. One thing happens after another. It happens in a particular order. So most people play the game and they live in that game as if it is their true life, like if it is as if it is their true reality, but it isn't our true reality. So when we identify with the ego, we think that the only thing that exists is experiencing the present moment as a result of the past. So now that we're on another plane, another reality, another way of thinking about things, because we are metaphysical beings or metaphysically open and aware, we realize that when it comes to this understanding of quantum mechanics, the quantum field, understanding that consciousness goes beyond space and time, we can then bring the future to the present moment. Okay, this is how we do quantum jumping. Now, that means that you manage the ego instead of being controlled by it. Okay, that means that you're led by consciousness rather than the ego. Here's the thing though, because everybody else is functioning from this reality, they're identifying with the ego. They only think that the proper and the only way to achieve a goal or to materialize and manifest something is to go by this linear idea of time, that the past creates the present. They will look at you as if you are delusional. Okay? They may even call you crazy and all types of interesting things. Now remember, I always say to myself, if there's a group of people, right? You know, just imagine something happens, but you're not aware of what's happening. and there's a group of people and they're running away or they're running in a particular direction. My belief is the majority of a group of people are going to essentially go the direction opposite than that of the one that is going to actually give you the most benefit, right? So for example, think of a giant monster like Godzilla or something like that. And Godzilla is walking down the street and everybody's running away from Godzilla. Godzilla is running toward everybody. So essentially Godzilla is chasing everybody. Now, to me, it makes more sense for me to not run with the crowd away from Godzilla, but to actually run toward Godzilla and run between his legs or, mindfully time the steps so that way I can get past him. So once I pass Godzilla, then he's just chasing everybody else and I'm free and I'm safe. Okay. Might be a crazy example, but I think about that often. Essentially, never follow the crowd. Okay. Be mindful. Use your mind. Don't just go along with that instinct of, oh, they're running this way. I'm going to run this way as well. Because most people will run together following one another and they will just eventually fall off the cliff. So as most people follow this understanding of time and materialization, you are going to follow this way. Now, how do you know how to follow this, essentially your future self into the present? Well, your future self, again, like I said, is related to your desires. Everything that you desire is a spark, a echo, a signal, a message from your future self. Now, the tricky thing is, in order for you to bring the future to the present, you have to embody this future self, okay? You essentially have to be this future self. What happens is, because you're functioning and you're acting and being in accordance with a different set of rules and laws, people are going to look at you like you're delusional. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. They're going to call you weird. They're going to say, oh, you're into that woo-woo stuff. You're into that new age stuff. But in reality, you are actually just aligning with yourself. You can look at it and you can observe those are the same people who are miserable in their present situation, right? Those are the same people that identify with the past. And if they keep identifying with the past, their present just essentially gets longer and longer. Their present gets longer and longer and longer, meaning their situation doesn't cease. It doesn't change. It doesn't transform. It is because they're not connecting with that version of themselves that have it all. Okay. They're not connecting with their desires. What they're doing is they're letting the desires that they have, because we all have these desires. What they're doing is they're letting these desires be dictated by the past. They're letting their desires be in a place where the desires are a fantasy. Okay. Their past trauma is stopping them. It's stopping them from being the person that has the desire that they want. Okay. So you have to not identify with the trauma, not identify with the past. It doesn't matter what your mom did, what your dad did, right? If anything, use that to fuel you to actually fortify recognizing the desire. Because sometimes what your mom did, your dad did, right, can be a reason why you desire something. But don't sit in the trauma of it. Recognize it as a gift. Okay? Now, that's your job to do. I'm not saying that the trauma of what happened to you is a gift, but what I'm saying is the way you see it can then transmute. Okay? It can reframe the approach. Instead of it stopping you, holding you back, making you question and doubt yourself, it can then fuel you to actually go after your desire, align with your future self, and thus bring it to the present. So this is what I'm calling like a form of delusional manifestation. Okay. I'm noticing that the word delusional is getting really, really popular right now. And that's great, because the reason why you should be delusional, the reason why it's important to recognize this word delusion, people think of delusion as something that isn't realistic. Okay. But the tricky thing with realistic and being real is that realistic is really only the understandings and ideas of what a person has already experienced. So if you are looking to achieve what you desire, 99.9999% of the time, this desire has not been achieved. And we know that people can achieve their desire. We know that you can achieve your desire if you choose to do so. But in order for you to do that, that means you cannot be realistic, because realistic is based on the past. And in your past, you did not achieve your desire. Okay? Realistic means that it is you being stronghold by a limitation, an experience. If not your own limited experience, somebody else's limited experience, because you may be very courageous and tapped in for a second, the understanding that you are divine and a creator, and that if you have the desire, then you are meant to achieve that desire. But when you share with a particular person, this is why your circle of friends is important. They may tell you, dude, you're not being realistic. Okay? Why? Because it could be a couple of things. They are themselves, and really that's what it is. They are themselves putting you in the box of their own limitations. They are looking at you and looking at all the things that you did not do or failed at, collecting all that as evidence to say that you don't have the skills, that you don't have the talent, that you don't have the capability, that you don't have the money, the access, whatever. It's still coming from their own limited perspective and belief system. This is why you have to be mindful about who you share things with, who you communicate with, especially if you are talking in terms of the affirmative. Like if you're saying things like, I am a millionaire, I attract this, I do this, I create this, right? And it hasn't materialized yet. Only a certain kind of person can understand and be of support for you to continue to live in that future self reality, thus bringing it into the present moment. So curate your environment and your circle of friends and make sure that they understand that you're not just speaking in terms of your future self to somebody who doesn't understand, and they may define you as delusional and say that you're not being realistic. They would look at you and like, how are you going to say you're a millionaire when, you're having a hard time paying the rent, or you're having a hard time keeping a job, right? So your understanding of this is not going to match everybody. So I want you to be delusional, but I want you to protect that delusion. I want you to look at that delusion as sacred. It's not for everybody. And for those who, you may share with, you hear stories all the time of people who said, you know what, I'm going to be famous. And they actually do it because they were aligning all aspects of themselves. They saw it in their mind, they spoke it, and of course they took action, right? And they continued to push forward because that was the only reality, that was the only possibility for them. They created that. And sometimes you hear the story of, they told their aunt or they told their mother, and their aunt and mother and dad thought they were crazy, said they were being delusional, get a regular job. Sometimes if you're the kind of person that can take that kind of I'm going to prove it to you mentality, if that fuels you, which leads into like a lower vibrational frequency of motivation, sometimes that can help get you through to make that breakthrough, but it's not sustainable. So you have to always tap into what is going to keep you moving forward. Because, yeah, people prove things to other people at a time, but it doesn't last because really the opinions of those people is really insignificant. So once you do make that breakthrough and you did prove it to them because you didn't tap into what it is that you truly want, now that you've proved it, what's the point, right? So I want you to really understand delusion is not about being realistic. It's not about being or identifying with the evidence, okay? The evidence of the moment. Don't think about what's happening now and identify with that. Remember, what happened now is a result of the past. What you do in this current moment, okay, dictates what happens next, dictates what happens in this current moment. So let's go further than that. Instead of just being in this now moment, bring the future to the now, right? Bring the future to the now. Focus on your desire, visualize, imagine, own that version of you. And when you do that, you bring that to the present moment. The future becomes the now. The delusion becomes reality. Okay? The quote unquote fantasy that people may say, like, oh man, you're fantasizing, becomes the experience. Okay? Never take for granted the power of your imagination. Anything that we imagine is happening. It is happening on a, atomic level. It is happening in a level by which we cannot see with these eyes because our consciousness is way more powerful, way more advanced. Our body is just a means to house the consciousness, right? It's only a means to house the soul, but it doesn't fully explain the soul. It doesn't fully captivate the soul, the consciousness. So when you visualize something, right, if you visualize health, you are more likely to be healthy. If you visualize and imagine wealth, you are more likely to be wealthy. If you keep doing that over and over and over again, that continues to compound and bring you to that future self, the version of yourself that has it all. As I mentioned and talk about and share with you in the book, The Future Self Frequency. So the important thing is to not be restricted by the present, okay? And the evidence of the present moment. That's the trap. And it's easy because that's what we've been taught. Every time you feel a little bit down about your current situation, always take yourself to the future. Always align yourself to that version of you that has it, because there is a version that has it. That's why you are desiring it in the first place. This is what I want you to understand. I probably won't have, let's see, a private plane. Why? Because I don't care to have that. I don't desire that. Right? To me, that's wasteful. So you have to, that's the thing. I can't even imagine what it is that I don't want to achieve in my future. It's not in my, it's not even in my thought process. All that I can imagine is what I do want, because that is what I'm meant to have. Maybe I can imagine if somebody else were to tell me what they want, then I can imagine, okay, myself having that. And then I will say, no, I don't feel like that's what I want. But just right now, to think about what I don't want in the future is evidence that I'm not meant to have that. Right. So you have to understand that what you want is the path that you are supposed to go on. That is your light, right? That is your lantern to get you through the darkness. The darkness represents the chaos and the unknown, right? Of, this physical reality. Not to say that the world is dark and everything is bad, because it's beautiful actually. But I want you to understand that light, that desire is the thing that is leading you throughout this open, vast land, okay, of infinite possibilities. It is a thing showing you the way. It is your guide. So listen to it. Be delusional, my friend. Do not accept reality as it is. Okay? The only reality for you is the reality you want and desire. That is your reality. That is what you're meant for. So go after it. Success is the only option here. I mentioned in another video that the game is rigged, but it's rigged for you to win. It's not rigged for you to lose. So be mindful again about your circle. Be mindful again about what you're consuming, what you're listening to, because it is essentially reprogramming your subconscious mind. So when you think about what you're putting into your subconscious mind, it's either going to support you toward creating the reality that you're meant to have and experience, or is going to, take you off the path. So always be mindful about your environment. Thank you so much for listening. Feel free to go to thefutureselffrequency.com, where you can purchase the Future Self Frequency, the Deluxe Transformation Edition. You can also purchase the journal. If you have some questions, some doubts, you can go to drabundant.com, where you can get the Future Self Frequency, the Essence Edition. This is a short version, introductory version, and you get the first chapter of the Deluxe Edition absolutely free when you sign on to my newsletter at drabundant.com. Thank you so much. Peace and abundance always.